Aloha, namaskar, and hello. Welcome to Climate Change Beyond Outrage, where we go beyond outrage to focus on solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. I am your host, Anu Hittel, broadcasting live from ThinkTech Studios in beautiful downtown Honolulu. There are many ways for you to get talking with us. You can join our conversation by tweeting us at ThinkTechHI, and now you can call us at 415-871-2474. Once we are done with the show, don't feel bereft. Join our conversation on our Facebook page of the same name, Climate Change Beyond Outrage. Communication is not just a one-way transmission process with a passive receiver at the other end. It is a complex, dynamic system of individuals, organizations, and communities. According to the Climate Change Communication Project at Yale, it is through this dynamic process that societies develop climate change awareness, misunderstanding, concern, and action. Messaging at the community and individual levels and getting these into public policy is partly the subject of today's episode. What are the difficulties in communicating an issue such as climate change? One that mostly has a long time frame, is multifaceted, and is what some call a slow boil, one where you may not even notice that the proverbial water is getting warmer until it is too late. The Yale Climate Change Communication Project found that improving public understanding of the scientific consensus that human-caused climate change is happening has the potential to improve public acceptance of the findings of climate change science and increase support for climate policy. Research has found that only 1 in 10 Americans correctly understands that there is a scientific consensus about human-caused climate change. That is, that nearly all climate scientists are convinced that human-caused climate change is happening. The question arises as to how to effectively communicate that scientific consensus and other such information about climate change. I have in the studio with me today Camilo Mora from the UH Department of Geography, who works on biodiversity processes and patterns. He has taught a great deal about science communication, in particular climate change communication. In his own way, he has been working on solutions at the individual and community level to tie each of these into a larger whole and tackle the problem of climate change and communicating about it. Camilo, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Anuk.
How did you get into climate change communication, and what are the messages that you feel are the most important to bring across?
So, as a scientist myself, many scientists around the world are very interested in basic science. That's what drives us, right? However, I think that in recent times, scientists are having a very important social responsibility. What we are doing these days is not so much about knowledge itself as it is providing information to fix a very serious problem that we had. So as a scientist for many years, that's all what I did. Basic science to understand why species are where they are, why are there a certain number of species on some places and why they are not on other places, basic stuff. And at some moment in my career, it became obvious that the causes of why species are where they are and sometimes where they are not there is because humans. We are now a massive force of evolution in this planet, both ways, good and bad ways, in the sense that sometimes we are driving a species to extinction, and some other times we are bringing a species from other places, and those species are doing massive damages to local ecosystems. So that got me into studying this issue of humanity as a driving force of these biodiversity patterns, and we studied this stuff for 10, 20 years, lots of knowledge being done. There are encyclopedias about this stuff. But then it became very obvious to me, how is it that, as you point out, that the scientific knowledge is very good, but somehow public understanding of this knowledge is very bad. And the problem with that connection there is that politicians on the other side are the ones that are supposed to implement the solutions. But if you don't have the general public understanding this, that means that the politicians are not going to pay attention to that. So basically, right now, is making us focus on this issue of communication of a science. Right. That, at the end of the day, is the beginning of the solutions.
Right, and that's sort of almost the broken link is you've got the information, which the scientists have, and then you've got public policy that's being made on the other side. And in between are the people who elect those public officials, right? And if they don't understand what climate change is about, then you're going to have public officials who will reflect that. And then we're expected to fix the problem with people who don't have the knowledge.
Yes. And to make matters even worse, I mean, that's exactly the pathway of how we fix the problem. And unfortunately, I don't think it's broken. As you say, it's broken. I think that it's rather a bottleneck.
Okay, so yes, a bottleneck. That's
in which there's a
optimistic.
lot of information on this side, but very little amount of information make it through that bottleneck to the general public. And unfortunately, we are being outsmarted. It's amazing that as scientists, we are supposed to be like smart people, and we are totally being outsmarted by interest groups. Because there are a lot of these solutions that are implemented at the other end by the politicians, they're going to have a huge economic impact on many different stuff. Just like, for instance, coal nowadays in the United States. You saw all of the political turmoil generated about whether we are going to continue having oil or not, just in this election. So what it means is that whatever solution you implement is going to impact economically some interest groups. So these interest groups, instead of generating the knowledge that is necessary, they are realizing that there is no need for us to work on the science. What we're going to do is tackle the middle people, right, the general public, so that they can drive policies through that way.
Right. So what got you to that point where you realized that this is happening and you wanted to change how you were just doing your basic science and reach out and do more communications? That what was there something specific, or you just sort of had your own slow boil where you realized?
No, for me it was kind of a concerning thing, and it was a sense of all kind of feelings, no one of which was a good feeling. Feeling of sadness of seeing the destruction of our environment, the sadness of seeing a species that are so beautiful that are going extinct, the sadness of knowing that my daughter is never going to be able to see a lot of species, including things like coral reefs. That pleasure that you and I might have had of going and swimming in the ocean and seeing beautiful coral reefs, that's a pleasure that these kids are not going to afford. So for me, again, that was this awareness that I got at some moment in my career in which I realized, you know what, we need to start moving beyond the science. And unfortunately, as scientists, we are people that, to some degree, we just don't care about that stuff, because we worry more about our science to be so perfect that we realize that the general public don't care about that stuff. So that means that we need to simplify the knowledge so much beyond certain standards that we as a scientists do have. And what it means is that one of the first blockages that you face there is the fact that it's not even the fact that people don't understand the science, but it's the fact that the scientists refuse to communicate the science on basic terms. They still want to keep it within the standards of a science. What it means is that you need to get a PhD to understand what a scientist do. And that was also another thing that drove me personally, is the fact that that realization that for us to communicate that science, it needs to be simplified quite a lot, more so than what we are used to as a scientist.
So that's an interesting point, because of course, many scientists feel that their science gets dumbed down when it goes out to the public, and then even more dumbed down depending on the politicians that you're sending this out to. And so, that's interesting to hear from you, that you recognize that that's a problem. How do you feel about overcoming that and bringing it into more of an understandable
We need to adapt.
sphere?
We are going to go extinct. Scientists, we are a species in the brink of extinction if we don't adapt to this.
We meaning the scientists or everyone?
No, later, yeah, I guess so. But as a career in itself,
I see.
we need to realize that we need to adapt to those situations. Just to give you an example, one time I was talking to a reporter from New York Times or Washington Post in one of the articles that we prepare on the press release, and I was actually talking to him about this situation on the complication of us communicating science to the general public. And we were making the point that it took us about 1.5 years to do this project for the media to pay attention for one day. Mm-hmm. The public interest on scientific articles that take about 1 year to complete is about one day.
Right.
By the second day, it's completely something different. And then the reporter, said something to me that was even more mind-blowing, that he said, well, you're complaining about that? Let me tell you what I had to deal with. as a reporter, the time that I had for a person to pay attention to my story, which I have worked very hard to write, is the time that it takes for this individual to put his finger at the top of his phone and scroll down that stuff, the finger all the way down.
So like 1 second.
That fraction of a second
Yeah.
is all the time that reporter has for an individual to pick up that story.
Right.
That just gives you a sense of the magnitude of the challenge that we had as a scientist. So if we don't understand that,
Right.
and that bottleneck is never going to get any smaller. It's never going to get any bigger for more information to flow.
Yeah, and so that's an interesting point that, you've got this, you've got science projects and data and so on that take a long time to collect, and a story that takes a long time to build up. And then you've got interest that only maybe lasts a second, and maybe 6 minutes if you really are interesting. Because I think that's about how long viewers view our videos.
Yeah.
It's maybe about 6 seconds. 6 minutes. But that also brings me to the point and makes me wonder, isn't that long-term threat of climate change a problem in terms of communicating the urgency to people, where it's that slow boil, you've got the frog in the water and it's slowly boiling, and it's like, oh, well, I'm comfortable. It's those shifting baselines. And is that one of the problems of communication?
Well, that is just to point out to you the magnitude, again, just adding up for the readers to understand the magnitude of the challenge that we had in our hands. We had a very short attention interest on this stuff, and it dissipates very quickly, yet we are dealing with a problem that you don't feel right now. And unfortunately, once we get to set, it's just going to be too late. The analogy that I like to use sometimes is the Titanic. The Titanic, this great thing that everybody thought there was just no way this thing could be sunk. They saw the iceberg coming. It's not like an accident that happened and they went down. No, they saw the iceberg coming. And they saw it there, and it was going so fast that they couldn't stop the boat. There was just no way to steer one side or the other. The inertia that the boat was having was sufficient for them to hit that iceberg. This is exactly what's going to happen to our planet. Is the fact that we see this rocky cliff that the whole planet is moving towards, and unfortunately, right now when we get there, it's just no way.
We'll just hope there are enough lifeboats, like unlike what was there for the Titanic. So that's one problem, is that you've got the communication from the scientists to the public, the attention span of the public. Then you've also got this long-term creeping problem, which we can all see, or most of us can see, and there is that issue in there. So what other issues have you sort of identified within that communication of climate change problems?
Well, we can write books about the series of limitations that we have there. The most critical one, in my opinion, is the short time that we had to describe these problems, and the fact that we don't continue reinforcing that knowledge. You look at the reason why advertisement works so well and why companies invest millions of dollars in advertisement, which is the same TV commercial being shown on every single intermission, is because people need to be kept reminded of all this stuff. So when you had a project that takes 1.5 years, you had one day, and for the next day there is nothing to show. That just gives you a sense on the interest, how quickly it can dissipate. But we, of course, have all kinds of problems as well. A critical one is what is called scientific literacy. Mm-hmm. Super sad. In the United States, for instance, the scientific literacy is 17%. So that means that the whole population of the United States and developed countries as well, only 17% of those individuals, 17 out of 100, are capable of understanding the physical processes of what's happening there.
Right. And so I think, this is a really interesting problem of how to get that information across to people. But at the same time, even when you have that repetition, there's that whole idea of, well, this is just too big a problem for us to solve. It's intractable. I'm not even going to bother. I'm going to move on to something else, and you lose them. And that's where I find it very interesting with your carbon tracker and your carbon neutrality project and some of these things that you've been doing. So which we'll need to take a break, but when we come back from the break, we'll talk more about your carbon neutrality project and how you involve people in that climate change, not the debate, but really in that information and the communication, which is a two-way street, and how they really start to feel involved. So when we come back from the break, we will talk about Camilo's new projects. Don't go away.
Aloha, this is Maria Mera, and I'm here to invite you to my bilingual show, Viva Hawaii on Think Tech Hawaii, every other Monday at 3 p.m. We're here to inform, motivate, and entertain you. Join us. Hola, soy María Mera y estoy aquí para invitaros a mi show bilingüe Viva Hawaii en Think Tech Hawaii cada 2 lunes a las 3 de la tarde. Estamos aquí para informaros, motivaros y entreteneros. Apuntaros.
Aloha and welcome to Think Tech Hawaii. I am Ina Chang. I am the guest host for Small Business Hawaii with Reg Baker. Tune in every Thursday at 2 p.m. and watch us. Aloha.
Aloha, my name is Josh Green. I host a show called Healthcare in Hawaii here on Think Tech. We get together once a week or sometimes twice a month. Depends when we're busy. We get together less often, but we love to see you here to talk about the preeminent healthcare issues in our state. Our programs vary very widely. We talk about economics, we talk about healthcare, we talk about social issues on this program. Thanks for joining us.
Welcome back. This is Climate Change Beyond Outrage, and I'm your host, Anu Hittel. In the studio with me, I have today Camilo Mora from UH Department of Geography, talking to us about communicating the climate change, which has become actually an academic science at this point, how to communicate this. So scholars are finding that this is, as you've said, a bottleneck. And there's been a lot of work done around this, and maybe in the next segment I'll talk a little bit about some of the findings and so on at the Yale project. But in this particular segment, I wanted to talk about your projects and what you've been doing. So if you would give us a little introduction to your project, and then we can go through some of that carbon tracking and offsets.
So one of the, as you point out in the earlier segment, one of the things that sometimes can overwhelm people is the magnitude of the problem, right? So for many people, this is something that is not going to be fixed by you or me, right? But another interesting realization of the work that we have been doing is the fact that the problem itself is the cumulative effect of things that you and I do.
Right, so it all adds up, and yet it is at the individual level, but the whole problem has sort of gotten away from us.
That's right. I mean, it's amazing. Simple things like you eating a steak, you multiply that by 3 billion people that eat steaks, that right there is the huge contribution of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere.
Right.
The problem is the multiplication of every individual impact that we do. You multiply that by 7.3 billion people that is on the planet, then you realize how is that these problems come to be so massive.
So you really need a groundswell on the other side, which is how can we all contribute to that solution?
That's right.
And that's what your project does.
That's right.
So explain your project to us, because I think it's a really fascinating and really cool way of going about things.
So yeah, the main project got started thinking about this thing that we are the problem, but at the same time we can be the solution as well. And the idea was born of a project called the Carbon Neutrality Project. The underlying principle is very basic. There are multiple carbon calculators. Basically, what you do, you enter your lifestyle. You know, like how much meat do you eat, your driving behavior, how many miles you fly, and then that tells you how much carbon you generate.
Okay, so let's take a look at because I think a picture, of course, is worth 1,000 words, and we're
Yes.
talking about climate change communication, so
That's
we
right.
should. So it would be bad if this episode actually didn't communicate
Right.
anything.
So this is like the front page. We are in the process of developing this, so we are having the first version of this deployed sometime in this fall. So, but here you can see the front page. The principle of fixing climate change is super simple. So you go there and look at the number one, you calculate how much carbon you generate. And the second thing is for you to calculate the number of trees required for you to sequester those emissions. So if the carbon that you generate is equal to the carbon that is sequestered by your trees, we will fix climate change by tomorrow.
Yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it.
Actually, we decided to start doing it.
Yes,
And if you guys don't mind, let's go to
The second slide?
maybe
Or-
the second slide. Let's try the 2nd
Let's
slide,
see
and we
what
can
the-
come back to this one in a second later.
Yeah, let's go on to the second one, and that'll show, that's got all your calculators, right? So that's
Right.
the first part, which
So-
is you trying to figure out what's your carbon footprint,
That's
essentially,
right. So this is here you can calculate the amount of carbon that you produce. The average American produces about 15 to 20 tons of carbon per year.
Okay,
And here is how you get those numbers.
so with
Basically,
transport and housing.
on food and recycling.
Okay.
And that will tell you how much carbon you generate.
Okay.
Now you
So-
go to the next slide. The next thing that you need to do is to plant trees.
Right,
And this is not
okay.
about you paying to plant a tree somewhere in Africa or in the Amazon. This is about you finding a place where to plant your own tree.
Okay.
And the important reason for that is, for instance, when we look at Hawaii, is the fact that we have destroyed over 80% of the native forest here. So we sometimes think that there is other places that need help to be fixed. It turns out that right here in Hawaii is where all of these efforts are necessary. So you can find places here where you can plant those trees for you to sequester your emissions. So that's kind of the underlying principle, is that we can
Right.
fix climate change by you knowing how much carbon you generate,
Yeah.
and by then planting the trees that are sufficient
I love it
to
because
sequester that carbon.
I've always thought the solution to the world's problems is trees. So,
Yes, actually, let me point out another important thing of the trees, and that's the fact that through multiple biological processes, they actually cool down cities. And
Right.
the value of cooling down a city is the fact that people then will use less air conditionings, that then will mean less electricity demands. If we don't have those trees, it's gonna cost in the orders of billions of dollars for us to upgrade the electrical grid to supply the electricity demand of everybody turning on their air conditionings as climate change starts getting worse. Those trees are 10 times cheaper than for us to destroy our environment and depend on an electrical grid that will give us the electricity that we need for our air conditionings.
right. And so, so let's just say, you said that the average American produces about 10 to 15?
No, 15 to 20
15 to 20
tons of carbon a year.
tons of carbon per year. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then how many trees would you need to plant to offset that?
So it depends on the species. Unfortunately, here in Hawaii, and we had a massive problem, is that many of these species, because they have been isolated for so long, they are very weak, ecologically speaking. So they are very slow growing. They never face a lot of mortality. So what it means is that the native species from Hawaii, you may have to plant quite a few of those. We are talking in the
Okay.
order of 50 to 100 trees.
Wow. Okay. And that's
A
each
year,
A year.
each person.
Okay.
Which is again the reason why this project, I'm so excited about this project, is the fact that you don't have to worry about, if you think that planting 100 trees is super hard, maybe what you had to do is, instead of planting all of those trees, maybe what you have to do is reduce your emissions.
Uh-huh.
So the idea is to allow people to keep in check how much carbon we generate.
So we could punish people and say you have to plant 100 trees if you don't reduce your.
No, actually, what I wasn't thinking about the punishment. I was thinking about the reward.
kidding.
No. But actually, we thought about it because
Yeah.
one other thing that we have learned from social sciences is the fact that humans, like to be rewarded
Yes.
by stuff. So when you
Right.
generate competition, you can hopefully incentivize people. So one of the other things, if you go back to the first page, to the first slide. One thing that we can do is to calculate the deficit that you had. Basically, how much carbon you generate that is not sequestered by your carbons. And then we can rank people, and they're on the top from 1 to 5.
Yeah.
You can see just like some fake people
Okay.
of how they rank.
I see.
So you know the person that is number 1 is the person that is the most carbon neutral right now. And the second person will have to had a deficit of 5 tons. So this person, the second one, will have to plant 5 more trees
I see.
to become first.
Okay.
So at any moment, you will know where are you ranking, and hopefully that will generate this competition for people to start racing to face climate change.
Okay.
We want to involve school children, and I just want to make a quick remark that there is a person that has been helping on this project. Her name is Lisa Martin. She's a woman that saw a presentation of mine at the state capitol, and she said, I want to help on this stuff, and it's just not me coming to this stuff. I actually want to make this happen. So the two of us have been working very strong on making this happening with school children from Hawaii.
Okay, and we'll get more into that in the next segment where you actually have the school kids helping and so on. But I just wanted to go back to some of the pictures we had, and you had another slide, which was that fourth one about 100 trees planted, and I'm just wanted to bring that up. So is that something that you're saying that people should plant, or is that something that has already been planted?
No, these are the ones that we had already planted.
Okay.
So right now, the idea is that we're gonna, again, just thinking about the style of Facebook and stuff, just to keep a constant communication with the users, we're gonna have news stories being displayed here.
Okay.
And right now, this is just the general balance of what the project has achieved, which is 100 trees planted to this moment.
And so then when you say that you've got one tree to be neutral, that means you need to plant one more.
Right, this is
what it will say. I mean, that's just, for
Yes,
instance, it's just an
yes,
example of
that's
prototype.
right. So at any moment, this webpage will tell you how many trees you need to plant to become carbon neutral. So
Okay.
this user here needs to plant one tree, and it has a deficit of 40 tons of carbon.
Okay,
But
and
again, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And then you've got the where do I rank, which we just talked about. So you can compare to your friends or to all users. But then what's the my trees? Are those the different kinds of trees?
No,
or-
those are the trees that you have planted.
I
So
see.
we want for people to adopt the trees.
Okay.
You know, this is like my pet. And I want to go and take care of that tree. So you're gonna have this thing here where you are always gonna see the photographs of the trees that you planted, and you're gonna see the tree grow, and many of these trees are gonna die as well. So just for you, for especially children, for them to realize that that's a life there. So every
Right.
time that we cut a tree, we're cutting a life.
So is your thought that with the names there, is that just like sort of the name, like you would name a pet or something? Or are those the names of the species?
Funnily enough, one of the several planting exercises that we had done, we were planting some trees, and one of the kids said, I want to put a name to my tree.
Oh,
Can I
right.
call it like Rocky or something? I was just like, oh, that's a good idea, so for people to start identifying these
Right.
trees by names as well. And again, it's just generating this sensibility about these problems. When you put a name and you put a face to this stuff, is when you start realizing that this stuff is real, and so is the solution to it.
Right, and so then you've got the children involved, and you've hopefully then, because the children are involved, you've got families, parents involved, and so on, right? And that kind of gets its own momentum going, right?
You know, like my daughter the other day, that was kind of, it just ended up happening that way, but it wasn't really any thought about it. I was hanging out with my daughter the other day, and she said to me, I just don't understand how is it that these presidential candidates don't come and give the lecture to the school children. Because if they come to the school children, then us will be telling our parents to vote for them. So I thought, this is literally what we're doing with our carbon neutrality project, is to get the kids to get excited about it.
Right.
And I'm telling you, once you get the kids, the parents come, and we get armies of people on the
Yeah.
events that we do. Of course, we are learning as well, how
Right.
to keep up the momentum on this stuff. And that's the reason why our project hasn't really been advertised that much,
Right.
is because we are not at that stage yet in which we can scale this up.
Right, and one thing about prototypes, of course, is that you want to try and iron out all the kinks and so on, so it does go well when it's successful when you launch it and so
Yes,
on.
right.
So, and that's something that we'll talk about in the next segment as to how, now you're taking it from the computer screen and from an individual out into the community and into an actual live tree with an actual live person, and how has that gone, and where is it all eventually going to land up, right? So we'll take a break and we'll come back in a minute, so don't go away. This is Climate Change Beyond Outrage.
I'm Jay Fidel, and I'm the host of Research in Manoa, Mondays from 12 to 1 on thinktechhawaii.com. Take a look at us and learn about geophysics, learn about planetology, learn about the ocean and earth sciences at UH Manoa. You'll really enjoy it. So come around, we'll see you then.
Aloha, I'm Kirsten Baumgart-Turner, and I'm fortunate to be able to host Sustainable Hawaii at thinktechhawaii.com. I hope you'll join in with us every Tuesday from 12 noon to 1 p.m. to see the interesting people we have to share with you their information. Aloha.
Aloha! How you doing? It's me, Angus McTech, wishing you to welcome and join us to see us on Hibachi Talk on Think Tech Hawaii. Join my co-hosts, Gordo the Texar, and Andrew the security guy every Friday from 1300 to 1345. We look forward to seeing you. We'll talk tech and we'll have some wee bit of fun. And remember, let your wing gang free wherever you be. Aloha!
Welcome back to Climate Change Beyond Outrage, and I'm here in the studio with Camilo Mora from UH Department of Geography with a very interesting project about climate communication and how to involve people in climate change issues and to actually do something proactive. And this is perfect for our show, Camilo, because the show is really about solutions to climate change problems that face people. So you are sort of the spirit of our program. And so we were talking about your project where you track carbon, a person's carbon footprint, and then you offset that, the person offsets that by actually physically planting a tree of their choice, perhaps even by naming it. And so when you've taken this out into the field where you've put these trees in the hands of people and so on, tell us about what some of the experiences and how that project has been working.
I mean, that sounds super simple, right? You go, you calculate how much carbon you generate, you go and plant the trees, and it's far from reality. If this thing was easy, climate change would have been fixed already. So you realize very quickly the amount of challenges that you face here. So, of course, the very first thing was to go and plant the trees, right? And one of the things that we realized there is that here in the States, something on the order of 90% of the trees that you plant die.
Because they're neglected, because they're not correctly planted?
Well, neglected is one. Yeah. It's related to that.
Something eats them?
Well, that as well. Okay. So let me tell you, all of these are true problems. The main problem, especially in the island of Oahu, and other islands have the same problem and other problems. Here, the main problem is the fact that when you plant those trees, the seedlings, the roots are very shallow. And because everything has been cut, there is no capacity on the soil to retain humidity. So as soon as it rains, all of that thing evaporates very quickly. So the roots of the seedling ended up with lacking water. So that's the reason why many of these trees die. So the state tried to plan so that the planting coincides with the raining season, so that hopefully there is enough periodicity on the rain so that these trees can remain alive. But if you, for some reason, have 1, 2, 3 weeks without rain, that tree is gone, it's dead.
So water is a big problem.
Water in those trees is the big problem. Now, of course, if we are talking about planting 1 million trees on something like DLNR that is completely underfunded, they had the best intentions in the world, but there's just no way they can afford to have all of their people to go and plant these trees when they plant them. So the question is, how do we keep those trees alive?
Right.
And one of the other things that we are doing, especially with the engineering department, with a professor there, is to develop a system that is affordable to keep those trees alive in the field. Basically, the principle of this machine is a tiny a small robot that you can plug in the soil, and it sends electricity from one sensor to the other, and the amount of electricity that flows depends on the amount of soil, the water that is in the soil. Okay. So the device can monitor whether there is water or not in the soil, and if it is too dry, then it turns on a water pump that puts water into your plant.
Okay.
And this device right now, we have spent like $15,000 developing it, but right now it costs on the order of $5 to $10.
Okay.
So what we are hoping now is that with this device, people can plant their trees, deploy the device, and this device will keep the trees alive. This is on third stage now, third version now. Again, with some school children last year, the last 2 years, we have been testing some of these watering devices just to see how well they succeed. And again, that turned out to be another massive development just to keep those trees alive there.
Right. So you're I love it. You run into a problem and then you try and solve that problem and keep going with it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the whole point of developing a prototype. So you go back and you fix some of those things. So I love that you're sort of tackling that problem of how do you keep those trees watered? Mm-hmm. Now, $5 to $10 doesn't sound like very much when you're just spending $5 to $10. Mm-hmm. But if you have a carbon footprint where you're supposed to plant, 100 trees, it's a big incentive for you to not have such a big carbon footprint.
Well, yes. Well, one of the other things that we have been trying to do with this device as well is so that it can be reused. All what you need to do for the tree is, for most trees, is about a year. It's the time that it takes them to go from the surface, the roots, all the way down for them to start acquiring water from the water table. So at that moment, those trees will be independent. So all what you have to do is to care for that tree for 1 year, and that tree will sequester carbon for the rest of his life for you. So every year you pretty much start from scratch again, and you can reuse your devices as well. And we are hoping that at some moment schools and maybe the state get engaged with this stuff, because I think that it's everybody's responsibility to start putting our hands on our chest that we need to fix this
Right.
problem. And $5 is, I mean, by the magnitude of the scope of the problem that we
Right.
had, is nothing, especially when you compare the billions of dollars that get invested for us to put a rocket in space, when the universe is going to be there in 100 years. Many of these species are not going to be there in 100 years. So by comparison, I just don't see a limitation on that side.
Right, and also, if it's something that's brought into the school system or something, then it is it's not an individual that's putting out that money every time. It's a project that's
Right.
happening
Actually,
within
I had
the community.
Yes, the image number 9. I think that we have it there. People can see some of the first versions. So this is the first prototype of it. This is about 1.5 years ago, the first version of it, and you can see the sensor on one side there in the soil.
Is that on the left? I
Yeah,
mean, sorry, on
the
right?
thing with the dirt.
Uh-huh.
That's the sensor right there, and the breadboard. That's where the microcomputer is, and the coffee jar is
Okay.
just where the water is. That's of
Okay.
course in my lab. Keep in mind that we're doing this with no money,
Right, right.
which at the same time, I feel even more proud of it. The fact that we have been able to pull out this device up to this
Right.
moment with no funding. And but right now we had a much professional device, and all of the stuff that you see there has been put in a super tiny microchip that altogether costs about $5.
Okay, and so that's the numbers there are just telling us what the temperature is. And
No, the humidity in
the
the soil.
humidity, okay.
Yes, and you can set what humidity you want on the soil. So you
see.
can set it up any humidity, because that's another thing that we realized is that many of these trees require certain amounts of water. So it's not that you can put the same water to all of them. They won't do good.
Okay.
So with this device, you actually can have that flexibility as well of saying how often and how much water you want to put to these guys.
So now you've got the tree, you've got the watering device, you need the person, and you need mostly it seems like you've done it in a group. We've tried it with a school. What age level are you?
So the groups that we are working on right now are grades 4 and 5.
Okay.
And those are groups. It turned out to be a challenge as well. So imagine me, a professor from a university, now going and giving a lecture on climate change to school children on grade 4.
Well, I would imagine that would really test your communication
Oh,
skills.
big time. I showed up there the first time. I remember this moment there, and I was there, and I was doing my PowerPoint presentation, and all of these kids were like this, like they were about to fall asleep.
Right.
And I realized, this is not the way to do this. And what I ended up doing, I got rid of the whole PowerPoints. I draw a line on the board simulating a landscape. And I start having the kids putting on that landscape all of the animals and plants and things on the ocean and stuff in there. And then we put the clouds, and then I make them understand climate change.
Right.
There it is.
Yeah.
There's the drawing right there.
Yeah.
And all of these kids, they got so excited. They were so happy to know that they knew this stuff. And for me, it was even more mind-blowing to realize that we are dealing with this huge complexity to explain climate change when school children can already figure it out all by themselves.
Right. And
So-
this is the thing, though, about the communication part, right? Because we are so used to just delivering the information, especially in university settings, right?
Yes.
Where you just stand up there, you deliver your information, the students take notes, and they go away, they do something with it, and then they either flunk their exams or they pass their exams, and you're done. But this is that complex thing that I mentioned in the beginning, which is that it's a two-way street. It's really a very complex and dynamic process. It's communication, you're taking that in, you're participating, and that's really what you did with those
Yes,
school
for me it
children.
has been a super massive learning experience to achieve what we achieved with the school children. And some of the parents of the school children have come to us, and some of them have said that whatever we did to their kids actually make them wanted to be a scientist. One girl said to her parents once that she wanted to be a scientist. You know
That's
how
great.
proud I was feeling in that moment
Yeah.
when we were able to communicate something so profound to a kid that this kid is willing to change their life, take that pathway.
Yes.
Now, a bigger challenge was third grades. Third grade. That I did a presentation with them, one of the exercises, and it didn't work that well.
Okay.
But now Lisa, the other person that is working with me on this project, she's developing this new program in which we are actually trying to do this with arts and theatric displacement. So it's actually a more integrative way of the kids being the story themselves. So we had like a circle that simulates the planet, and every kid is a tree, and then one kid is a house. So for you to put the house to get into that circle, that means that you need to cut a tree. You need to get rid of one of the kids. So now one of the kids is out of the game, and all of the kids want to get back into the game, right? While they are sitting there. So we start generating on them these conflicts that we had in nature today with the planet, in which nature requires certain space, but we humans require some other space, and this conflict is unfortunately being lost by nature. So we are communicating the same message now to school children, but we are completely different way. And Lisa is the one that is hammering down that protocol, but much harder communication with the graders.
With third graders. So it was a little older grade is probably easier, but at the same time, I mean, if you can get them younger, that's good, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. And of course, on the other side of it, I kind of feel, I mean, this isn't something you're working on, but that getting them as they're older and keeping that interest is also very challenging, because I know that with with children when they get into the middle school years and so on, when they don't want to be doing something geeky like science or, and that's why a big challenge they have with girls getting into science and all of those kinds of things. So you have all of those sorts of challenges that inform this problem as well. I mean, this is another place where it shows up.
It is a super bad problem. And as a professor at the university that gets the kids right after they finish high school, I realized that they something did happen at high school. They missed something there. Unfortunately, it's completely out of my league to understand what did happen there. But it's very clear to me at that level that something is just not happening there. It's not completely right. And now that I'm working with school children, I now realize that it had to do with this stuff as well. The sense in which there are these stuff that the kids bullying and stuff of geeks and nerds.
Right.
I myself, I feel super proud to say that I was a nerd. All my life was a nerd, but we were top 5 of the best students. I just didn't care what my friends would call me. I know that I was on the top 5 students, so why is it that something that you cannot feel proud of? So unfortunately, we're dealing with all kind of
lots of problems beyond just this one particular thing, right? And so you're just sort of scratching the surface. That's the tip of the iceberg, so to speak, to bring back your Titanic
analogy. Yes.
Analogy. But just quickly, because we only have a couple of minutes left of the show, and I wanted to ask you, what if there was any sort of final message or anything you wanted to give to our viewers as we leave the show.
Yes, do you mind if showing like image number 6?
So, yes, there we go.
So this is my daughter right there. She's gonna be super happy to see herself on TV. And that is, I think the message for everybody who is watching this stuff is the fact that as families, we can go and be part of the solution. And that tree right now is 1.5 years old. It's all taller than my daughter right now. So we are part of the problem. We are not part of the problem. We are the problem. But as you can see, we are also part of the solution. And the solution is right there staring at us. So it's something that also will allow for families to integrate. It's about doing something that we can all feel proud of. And I think that more so than any science that I had done in the past, I think that should be the message. Let's start doing stuff that we can feel proud of knowing we did it.
Wonderful. I love it. I love that PhD professor is down in the dirt doing the real stuff with the kids. That's wonderful. Thank you for your wonderful work, and I really look forward to seeing your project blossom. And I just wanted to leave with one. It's not all doom and gloom, of course, as Camilo has told us and proved to us that there is a lot of hope out there, but and wonderful projects happening. But one thing I wanted to mention from the climate change project at Yale, and I'll just read that out. It says that they revisited their results from a national survey conducted just prior to the Paris Agreement. and asked Americans about the international negotiations, how much the US and other countries should do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and whether the US should only act if other countries do too. A large percentage of Americans, 71%, said it was important to reach an agreement to limit global warming, and 43% said reaching an agreement was very or extremely important. So that's good news. Majorities of both Democrats, about 85%, and Republicans, 64%, said an agreement was important. In contrast, only 3% of Democrats and 24% of Republicans said reaching an agreement in Paris was not at all important. So I think that is good news. And I think we are sort of inching there. Whether we'll get there before everything collapses on us or not, you know, that's something we're going to make sure doesn't happen, right? So thank you very much for being with us today, and we look forward to hearing more about your projects as you go along. Much success to you.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
And this is Climate Change Beyond Outrage, and you will see us for our season finale next week on Tuesday at 1 o'clock. And in the meantime, stay tuned on our Facebook page, Climate Change Beyond Outrage, where we're also putting up things about the current climate change meetings going on in Bonn, Germany right now. So we'll see you then. Aloha, namaskar, and goodbye.